I'm Thomas Umstattd Jr. with Author Media, and today I'd like to talk about how and why to blog your book ahead of time. This is the act of taking parts of your book, chapters of your book, and putting them out as blog posts before your book comes out. Now, some people have been throwing some shade at this recently, and I'd like to respond to that. I think that throwing shade at book blogging can really cripple authors' marketing activities. And if you're an author and you feel like the only thing that you can blog about is how to write a book, then you're in trouble. And I have some good news for you. You can blog your book ahead of time. Now, quick note, I'm talking here about nonfiction. If you were thinking about blogging your novel, that's a totally different animal and the subject of a different video down the road. But this is something that I know a little bit about. Several years ago, I wrote a blog post, Why Courtship is Fundamentally Flawed, and it had over 1 million people read it in just a few weeks. And those people ended up putting up the money for me to make the book on Kickstarter. And they raised over $11,000 on Kickstarter. And ultimately, it turned into a book. I've got a copy right here. It's also an ebook and an audiobook. And it started off as a blog post. But not only that, many of the chapters of that book started off as blog posts as well, and it was very successful. So don't let anyone tell you, oh, you can't blog your book ahead of time. So one thing that's important to note about blogging your book is that your reach with your blog is wide, while the reach of your book is deep. So what do I mean by that? I mean that a lot more people are going to read your blog than are going to read your book. That's definitely been the case for me. But there's a big difference between reading my blog for 5 minutes and reading my book for 2 hours. And so it's a different kind of communication. You're reaching people in a very different way. Now, some people are like, oh, well, they're not going to read your book if they've already read your blog. And that's totally false, because that's like saying that people aren't going to watch the movie based off of the book because they've already read the book. The reality is that the people who've read the novel are the first to watch the movie based off of the novel, and the people who've read the nonfiction blog are the first in line to buy the nonfiction book. And so the wider your blog spreads, the more people you can reach. The other thing I like about blogging your book, though, is that it helps make your book better. So this is definitely the case for me. Blogging is a two-way communication between your readers and them and you. And so I would put out a blog post and they would comment. Sometimes they would like what I had to say. Sometimes they would not like it. Sometimes they would be confused or they'd misunderstand what I was writing. And I ended up using that information to change the book. Like, for instance, there was a chapter I wasn't sure whether or not to include. I didn't know people would be interested in the history of courtship. And so I put it out, an early version of the chapter, as a blog post, and people loved it. And so it ended up being the second chapter of the book. This is something that may not have made it into the book because I wasn't sure if 20-somethings cared about history. It turns out they do. And to this day, it's the most popular chapter. It's also, interestingly, one of the most convincing chapters when it comes to making my argument. While other blog posts were confusing. So I had to make changes in the book to make them less confusing. People were getting upset and angry over the wrong things. My book's very controversial, but I wanted them to get angry about the right things, not the wrong things. And the blog let me know if I was having the reaction I was wanting to have. And then other parts of my blog were just boring and they weren't getting a resonance. And so those blog posts did not make it into my book. And I was able to know what was working and what wasn't based off of my Google Analytics and my comments and my social shares. That's the kind of feedback you don't get just talking with an editor. They can think what readers might respond. They can guess, but they don't know. When you post your book as blog posts, you can know if it's working or not. This is very, very valuable. Each blog post is an advertisement for my book, and from time to time, somebody will find one of those older posts and share it on Facebook, and it will go viral all over again. It'll be this big flare up, and thousands more people come to my blog, and it brings in all this new attention to my blog and all this new attention to my book. Why would I want to take those posts down when it's bringing me all of this attention and all of these sales? Answer: I wouldn't want to. So don't let somebody else force you into taking down these free advertisements for your book. Now, I know some people are saying, oh, well, the contract. If you're traditionally published, the contract's more complicated. You have to put in special language that this content has pre-existed somewhere else on the internet. Okay, put in the special language. Get an agent who's willing to fight for this for you. It's a small price to pay for all of that free promotion and publicity. If I had to choose between having a big following of people who are already passionate about my book and having feedback from them on exactly what was working in the book and what wasn't, and those posts promoting my book, and then having to put some extra language, or the other way around where I didn't have any of those good things, but I had an easier contract, I would go with the harder negotiation every time. And I think this is an important point to tell if you have a good agent or a bad agent, in the sense of whether they get it, in the sense of digital marketing and digital communication. This is one of those things that lets you know if your agent gets it or not. And it's important for your agent to get it, because your editor at the traditional publishing company is not going to get it. Editors are not trained in marketing, and they don't know what they don't know. And so they're always going to be advocates for the old-fashioned way of doing things. So you need your agent to be kind of a new school agent. An old school agent's not going to get you where you're wanting to go. So a quick case study, a book that I love, Stuff Christians Like, started off as a blog that I loved, Stuff Christians Like. I read the blog and I bought the book. Now, if you look at the cover of Stuff Christians Like, it's got a picture of a side hug on the front. Now, why a side hug? Well, Jonathan Acuff wrote hundreds of blog posts, and his one about side hugs was one of his most popular ever. So he knew he had a topic that resonated with his audience. He didn't have to guess if it was working. He knew it was resonating, and so he knew to feature that. He also featured his other most popular posts. Now, many of his posts didn't make the cut. He only featured the most popular ones, and he featured brand new things that Christians like that were not featured on his blog. And I think this is an important point to make. You need to have something new, something fresh in your book. You can't just copy and paste from your blog. It's a different medium. You need to adapt it, and you need to have something new, a special excuse to give your readers to come and read your book. It helps you make the sale down the road. And it's like there's some content exclusive to your book. But don't go crazy. You want to put as much in your blog as you feel comfortable with, and only reserve just a little bit of what's left over for your book. You don't need a lot of exclusive content for people to want to read your book, assuming that you're thrilling them with your book. And this is a big if, because why would they want to read your book, to pay to read your book, if they won't read your blog for free? And so this is a way to test to see if your ideas are finding resonance. So bottom line, blogging can be a great way of promoting your book. Blog your book ahead of time. Use it to get feedback. The experience of reading a blog and the experience of reading a book are so different. They don't compete with each other any more than reading a book and watching a movie compete with each other. They're totally different mediums, and don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I'm Thomas Umstattd Jr. with Author Media. Thanks for watching.